Hey everybody, this is Marcus Kloepping with Autonomous Pivot here in South Central Nebraska on a cold January evening. I want to go over your end of the season reports. Every AP customer that had service in 2024 will have one of these in their notifications. Once again, that's the little bell up in the corner of your app. That's where we notify you of everything going on within the app. So here on the page, you'll see my pivot. This is Rosenau North. If I go ahead and open this up, you'll see the typical app interface open up. Not much to show right now while we're out of season, but if I go to my notifications, which is this bell, and open this up, you'll see my end of the season report available. Everyone should have one of these. This came out about the end of November. We try to auto-generate these after all the crops are out. So you have this sitting here. If someone reached out to you to go over this and maybe you didn't have time or you haven't looked at it, please take a chance to look at it. If you'd like to go over more detail with myself or Ashley or Daniel, just let us know and we'll set a time to go over this with you. But we're going to go over mine. So as I open this up now, you see a new tab should show up. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you here. So this is basically my report. You can see here they generated this on December 2nd, 2024. Here's the location of my pivot. These are all the details at the beginning. Some of the details we asked you when we set these up originally. This is also a chance for you to double check and make sure that what we have for your details are correct. If something is incorrect, we can change this and rerun the report for you with different info. So if you see here, my rotation of my pivot, I go counterclockwise. My sprinkler area covers about 119 acres. Now, for you guys that have end guns or corner systems, we do not cover those acres. So this is actually about 135, 140 acre pivot, but we only cover 119 under the 8 spans I have on this pivot. My flow package is 700 gallons per minute. That's what my nozzles are set for. My fastest circle is 10 hours. Total rainfall for this year between April 1st and the end of the season, I received 12.83 inches. That's what actually fell into my tipping rain bucket at my farm. The next line we added, which is new, you'll see this in the app this summer as well, effective rainfall. So of that almost 13 inches that fell, I was only able to capture about 9.5 inches. So what that means is that I may have had a full profile and maybe a 2-inch rain came through and nothing was absorbed. I know we all deal with that. You know, we get rain after rain or we get in water and then it rains. We're going to try to record that for you and show you that in numerical form. So you can see here, if I would have been able to capture all the rainfall, which is easy to say now after the rains have fallen, but if I would have maybe left some more room in my profile to hold rain, or maybe not gotten a 3-inch rain, you see that I gave up, 3 inches there of moisture. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. Total irrigation on my farm, I pumped 9.25 inches. And it looks here, optimal irrigation, if I would have followed our recommendations to the T, AP or Autonomous Pivot would have recommended me to pump almost 9.5 inches. So I underpumped a little bit, but between my effective rainfall and total irrigation, the main thing I want to look for down here is the total crop ET. So this is what we feel that you needed to raise that crop in this season on your farm at this pivot. So if you see mine, let's just say 9 inches and 10 inches. I'm sorry, 9.5 inches and 9 3/4 inches. So almost 19 inches. My total crop ET was about 17.5. So yeah, I did overwater a couple inches, but I feel like that went really well for me. I was able to keep underneath my allotment of what I'm trying to stay under for irrigation. And then ET0, that is if we put the kind of a number to let you guys know if we put this back into a traditional grass field or meadow, didn't have rows of crop or individual seeds planted, that's what we would have needed to raise a crop of grass, basically native grass, so 31.38 inches. So a lot of people will ask, like, isn't row crop farming bad for practices or, use more water? No, not necessarily. So we always point that in here. Next thing you'll see here is you can see on my pivot, I had all corn this year. corn, 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 every slice of the pivot, every 45 degrees here shows us corn. The next here is our soil average or available water holding capacity, AWHC. This is basically in decimal formation. So slice A up here, the top part of my field, in inches 0 to 6. Each inch can hold 0.21 inches of moisture. From 6 to 12, I can hold 0.20. From 12 to 18, I can hold 0.20. And from 18 all the way down to 48, I can hold 0.21. You may see that yours are single digit or less than mine or maybe more than mine. We all are dealing with different types of soil. Once again, this really is how we know how much that soil can hold, and we know we're at capacity. You can see my field is pretty even. All the slices are fairly even, but there are different areas of this field that water in different ways. So just want to point that out to you, let you know that's what these numbers mean. We can always go into more depth with them and look at them more in depth, but if you have an area that looks like it's worse or not producing as well, this is the first place I come and look and check these numbers to see what they look like all the way across the board. This is the first page or the second page you get in the report. This goes back to basically the main screen on your app, which shows your water balance, your MAD, maximum allowable depletion, and then also your ET, what your crop uses. So if you look here, you'll see my orange line across the top. That was my actual reading out of my GPR to know where my water was actually at. The brown line is if I would have followed our recommendations to the T, that's where I would have actually been. And then the purple line is our goal. So we'll show this throughout the whole season. At the bottom of the page, what you can see here is the red line is your root zone. If we convert this from percentages back to inches, you can see here in my field, we started measuring at 18 inches. And by the time we get over here to the far side of the page, which is around R1 or July 27th, you can see I was measuring to 24 inches. So you can watch this. This shows where we're measuring. You'll also see with the MAD line here, it does change by the growth type and the stage and also the ET and the weather. ET is, of course, evapotranspiration. That's what your crop's burning every day. That's this brown graph shown down here. You can see it kind of goes up and down based on when we got weather events or when it cooled off or warmed up. But this is a great relation as well at the growth stage to know kind of what your crop's burning. All the blue lines down here are rain events. You can see those. Green lines are my irrigation passes. And then brown lines are when my system or AP system recommended for me to irrigate. It doesn't always work that you irrigate on those days. I could have been fertigating and making a fast pass. I think that's what happened over here. If you look at the bottom here at VT, I know I was fertigating here, so instead of a 60 hundredths pass, I was putting on about a 30 hundredths pass. So you can see it was a little bit lower. Where this wanted me to bound up a little higher, I didn't quite make that jump because I wasn't putting on as much. So easy to show this at the end of the season when we measure the rains and everything. But we want you to know that want you to know kind of what's going on with this and know that we're tracking this day by day, even hour by hour in some of these fields. So here's the first part of it. You can see I did get below my MAD level here a couple times. Not too horrible. You can get down here at the 40-50% and still raise a heck of a crop. This line will be determined based on your soil type. So if you have very sandy soil, you may see this down at the 50% level. But where I have pretty good holding, mine is up here a little bit higher. So let me go down to the second side of this. This is when the summer got a little drier. Just so you guys know, for instance, I did not really start watering until July 12th, you can see here. So around this July 12th time, that's when I really started irrigating. We had a couple rains here, nice rains throughout here that kind of got us through. But you can see here from about July 10th, 12th, that's kind of when I started, all the way through to this rainstorm here in August. I basically ran, 40, 45 days straight irrigation. I wasn't making huge passes. I was doing about 50 to 60 hundredths each pass. So not an inch or an inch and a half by any means. But in that amount of time, I could keep that pivot wet, keep moving around. You can see it does drop down here. I got a little bit behind, but I was keeping up with it. We were putting water to it. And when we did finally catch this rain, which ended up being over an inch, it took me up here to full. 100% is 100% saturation. I do warn people, you can see here that I was at the top at 100% for maybe a day or so. If you see in your watering patterns that you're at that 100% or fully or filled all the time, you may want to back off how much you're putting down or how fast you're making those passes. We've seen this last year that keeping those roots saturated basically drowns them, and it's also flushing out any extra nitrogen or phosphorus or whatever you're putting down during, before, or after the last season. So we want to know that's there and not rinse it out. You can see you didn't have to water much after that. Got a couple nice rain showers. I did make a couple passes and then I quit. They wanted me to make 3 passes at the end. Here I just made 2. And then eventually, by the time I would have thought about making another water, you can see the demand dropped all the way off and these lines went down. Even here before harvest, we did catch a rain in October, and you can see that recorded on there and showed it as well. So this just shows me, you can see here during R2 and R3, R1 and R2, how much water we were using. It was very hot during this time of the year. And then you see here by about August 12th, after we've had some rains, moving to R3, we're not using the demand. It cooled off then. We were getting better rains, better moisture. So just a nice thing to be able to look at the end of the season. Same way you look at a yield report. Or grain sampling, you just want to know kind of what you had out there and what you did, kind of what you could have done different, or maybe a plan for next year. I know it's January, nobody really wants to talk about irrigation, but I truly feel that I've gotten better through this system over the past 3 years, just by looking at what I did and trying to change for next year. So I encourage you to take a look at this. So that's kind of the first couple pages of this. We'll go down to page 3. This is my pressure and speed. So if you see over here, we see on the far left side, we see water pressure. Let's see here. Here's the water pressure over here. On the far right side is pivot angle. So you can see my pivot is running in reverse. So I'm going, 0 to 360, 360 to 0. But you can see as I make circles around here, each one of these light blue dots gives you a degree of the field. So 0, if I just had a wiper pivot, it would stop at 180 and go back, or maybe 180 to 360 and go back. But that would show me a half wipe. This is a full circle on a quarter. But you can see here, as my pivot walks around, the pressure while it's moving here, we have blue lines up here. We have some pressure dots up here. Down here at the bottom, when the pivot is stopped, you can see the pressure is 0. So I have 0 pressure now. This is a couple things. We do this to make sure that you have good pressure at the end of your pivot. That's where we're measuring this at. And we also want to make sure your pivot's moving. We do send alerts out now in season if we notice your pivot is parked and running, or running and dry. More the parked and running, especially people with tight water budgets. We want to make sure that the pivot wasn't parked and the well restarted, or somebody left the well on and while the pivot isn't running, it's still water. We had a number of those this season. It was nice to be able to alert growers about that and let them know that. On the pressure side, I just tell you to look at this. Look kind of where your bottom of your pressures are. If I drew a line over here, you see them between the 15 and 20 psi, all the way up to 45. I know that I have 15 psi regulators. This is a pivot that's only a couple years old, due to the old one crashing after harvest a couple years ago. So pretty good shape there in my regulators. But if I saw a bunch that were lower, I may have the regulators looked at, or I may even have the well looked at to see if we're losing water or pressure. These higher sets of numbers here are when my end gun turns off and I'm pointing down a hill. So you can imagine the pivot doesn't have to force water up the hill. We're going down. And with the end gun off, I'm gaining probably 100 psi. So the pressure does go up, but you see a nice band across here, so you know that it's at least repeatable. If I come down to the next line here, you can see the same thing. See, some of these look a little different. This pass was a fertigation pass. And then there would have been one at the beginning of July as well. The pressure's pretty good down here. See, we had a couple dots down here at the low end, but it could have been where I started the pivot here, or it could have been where I paused it to check something on it or walk it or take a look at it. But I just want to see that. I want to see some common spread in there. You will see some reports where it goes down towards the end of the year. Could mean that you're pumping the wells pumping dry, or if you have a bunch of wells in a mile section, something like that, to where that can happen. So I always like to point this out. This is telemetry, like I said, and pressure. So also in the app, you'll be able to see this. And in the app, you can actually touch these areas, and it'll tell you exactly what time of day it was, what degree the pivot was at, and then what pressure you're shooting. So I know these are along my road where the end gun turns off, and that's where my pressure does spike. So I've done the research to know what's going on and know why that's happening. But if I started seeing a bunch of other ones down lower, I may be concerned. Here, after I got an irrigating, you see some scattered ones, 1 psi. It could have been me moving the pivot. It could have been a little bit of water in the sensor, but I'm not too worried about that. Next page is my alerts. We will alert you to crop health, water stress, disease, pests, weed pressure. I actually used my alerts also to timestamp when things were happening in my field. So here's my first one. April 10th, we strip tilled. This was into a cover crop. You can see it just tied it with a picture there. April 22nd, I terminated all the cover crop. I actually wrote in here what I sprayed it with, just so I had the record of that as well. You can also see what the crop looked like on that day. And when I come back, a couple weeks later, I know here's the same thing. April 24th on this one, April 22nd and April 24th. These are two sides of the pivot. So I put them both in there to know what we sprayed everything with. Now you can see here my next one, May 6th. I was kind of late planning in this, but the corn is going in. You can also see that my cover crop did terminate fairly well there. There is a little bit of green in there, but overall I was happy. I kind of watched this day after I sprayed, making sure that I wouldn't need to reapply. I am on the road a lot, so in critical times like that, it's nice to be able to look at my camera, 3 or 4 pictures throughout my camera in the day. Even as this was parked, I'm still getting an image every 3 hours from the pivot. And if it's running, I get an image every 30 minutes. So good to know you have that data. Corn was going on the west side. This is actually the east side of the pivot, but I just made that note to know where we started and when we started. Next image I have was the corn is planted. So on May 7th, it was planted. You can see that. You can see a little better picture of the cover crop, but that was when we finished. Seems odd to put that in there, but you never know with rain if you'll get done. We could have got pulled off this field. The gentleman that planted for me this year does a lot of custom planting around the area, so he kind of fits me in with my small operation when he can. And just so I had a record of it, we started on the 6th and he was done by the 7th. So I scroll back down a little bit. The corn was emerging here. You can see in the images we're starting to get corn coming up. So the 18th, I always want to track that on my own so I know how long it was between planting and emergence. I did not have to make a pivot pass on this at all, but I would have recorded that or seen that afterwards. May 28th, I needed to spray this corn. This is what I sprayed it with. I kept record of it just for myself to know what I sprayed it with. And I wanted to see what the corn looked like before I spray. That way, once again, I could watch. And if we have an issue, I could always figure out what's going on. This was the word I put in. This was pollination. I just made the comment, looks itchy, kind of a long-standing joke between myself and the guy I farm with. Looks itchy, so I knew we were pollinating. That's also a trigger for me to put another pass of fertigation on for my pivot, but that was a trigger for me to know when we hit pollination, kind of keeping track of the crop. This was a test. You can see we got some brown silks out there, but this pivot does get used a lot for tests or trials or showing things to customers. So you can see in this image that the silks were brown. Pollination was basically done. I wanted to be able to show that or keep a record of it. So those are all my alerts. Notifications, here's the alerts. You can see who made the alerts. If it's the AP agronomist, if it's myself, it was the system. You can see here something as far as rain is forecasted or rain is expected, corn going on the west side. You can see when I did all those, these are all entered on the same date. You can see over here. but I had them marked on my phone when we did it. So I just went back to a picture and made notes of it. But it was just a way for me to keep all that. Here's an alert we had on it's raining in your field. I did do a mid-season report in July. I wanted to know kind of where we were before that. I also did one after that 45 days of watering to know what was going on. You'll see I had one here in August. But those reports were really handy to me to know, was I behind? Was I ahead of schedule? I found that not watering by, based on what my neighbors were doing or the guys I drive by every day, it was hard sometimes, but making those decisions, I think, is what helped me raise a good crop this year. So my alerts, rain notifications, aerial images I had for this year. You can see you'll get a couple passes. We did provide a couple passes this last year. Aerial is going to be changing, I think, within our company, but these are fixed wing planes right now. This is a thermal image. You can see the nice spray pattern on my pivot. It is walking counterclockwise, like I said. You can see this area that's lighter soil up here, kind of a brighter white. That's a very sandy knoll up there, also quite a bit of elevation, where this is the bottom of a hole over here. So between these two is probably 50 feet of elevation change. So I always like to look at that and know what's going on. We do see a nice pattern across the field, nothing real jaggedy. We don't see any circles, meaning a spray pattern with a pivot, something like that's going on. Next image is just a red, green, and blue. So just what you'd see through a camera, a regular camera. You can see my well. I actually have a parking strip here for my pivot when the well sits here in the middle, so you can actually see that. The heat indicator here where the brome grass is showing more heat. On my NDVI, this is the image you get back that shows green mass from the plane. So anywhere where it's lighter, there's of course less cover out there. Could mean that the corn or crop hasn't canopied yet. Could be a lot of things, but overall pretty green uniform space in there. You can see a yield change up in here. Let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Up in this area and up in here, we have a yield change, so you can actually see it on the map. This stuff looked a little thinner earlier. It was actually better corn by the end of the year, but you can definitely see where it was a little darker on this side. And then anywhere on the edge, you can see that's where we turned around in the field. This is a little flooded out area down in here. This is a pocket of pasture. So you can see all that along the edge and know kind of what's going on. We did this pass in July, then I had one in August. You can see it looks pretty uniform across the field. You can see the top of that hill that I just talked about up here, and you can see the bottom of the little area over here. But now I think this is where I really started to see the other side of the field really catch up and look better. So now the right side of my field, especially down here, looks a lot greener and darker. This side looks a little bit lighter. The pivot was actually parked right here. We caught it right in the middle of a rain when I was making a pass. So you can see where it was parked at. That pivot lane's still showing up in there. And you can see over here on the far right side, it's darker on the side that was watered. Also darker over here because it was a better crop. So this side was a little bit thinner, more volunteer corn in there, kind of drew everything down. So it was a good indicator of kind of what I was going to see before harvest. And then here was the watering events. This records every time that we gave you a recommendation or they gave me a recommendation. Also what rain fell, what the optimal. So you can see here on the 25th of June, let's see here. 25th of July, I put on a ½ an inch. Optimal is 0.55. We got 0 inches of rain. So when they go down and total all this at the bottom, you'll see the totals here of our 9.25, 9.59, and then 12.87. So this is your rainfall optimal and then planned irrigation. So it's a nice way to keep track of all that. This is also useful at the end of the season if you have to let your insurance company, if you need to prove to your insurance grower that you didn't abandon the field, or maybe even prove to a watering district that, hey, I did water and this is how much I watered. This day by day, it looks like a lot of numbers, but I tell people it's nice to have that data and look, even to know what you were making for passes. So this is kind of the end of the season report review. I would love to go through this with anybody. We can do it over a phone. We can do it on computer. I can come out and see you. Same with Daniel and Ashley. But I think this is really what you pay for with our product. All of our sensors that we mount on the side of the pivot really report this all back to us and how we record this. So just know that it's here for you. We'd love to go through it. If you have any questions, please give us a call, reach out, and we'll be to you here in another 30 days with another video. So hopefully you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.